Hello and welcome to this stunningly beautiful and haunting Crystal Palace. So I've decided to come down and visit somewhere again that's been on my bucket list for a long time. And again, I was fanatical about this place probably 20 years ago, and I've decided this is the year I need to come out and see these things. But I've picked the worst day I could have done. It's 32 degrees today, but it looks gorgeous in this sun. Across the next 3 videos, we're going to be exploring the different elements that made up the large site of Crystal Palace Park. From the main Crystal Palace building itself, to the fountains, attractions and many different forms of unique transport found within the park. So let's begin today's video with a brief story on how the Crystal Palace came to be. Then we will begin our explore of the site, looking for all that remains to this day. Originally built in Hyde Park in London to house the Great Exhibition of 1851, it was designed by Joseph Paxton, and it was one of the largest buildings in the world at the time. The building was made from iron support columns and covered completely in sheets of glass, and then it earned its name as the Crystal Palace. After the successful exhibition came to a close some 6 months later, a consortium of businessmen that included 2 board members of the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway came up with a plan to relocate the palace to Penge Place at the top of Sydenham Hill in South London. The area was renamed Crystal Palace after the landmark, and the surrounding park also took the same name. The new palace was rebuilt at the new location, but this time it would be modified and made much larger than the original. It had its central transept greatly enlarged, and 2 further transepts were added to either end of the main gallery. It was opened on the 10th of June 1854 by Queen Victoria. The park and surrounding area had further infrastructure installed to house the palace, from large terraces and grand stairways to elaborate fountains and attractions within the park itself. It would also have 2 railway stations built to accommodate the permanent exhibition. Crystal Palace High Level Station, located just behind the palace itself, and the Crystal Palace Low Level Station, located at the western edge of the park. It was also serviced by the existing Penge West railway station to the south of the site. The park and the palace hosted numerous events and exhibitions throughout its 82-year life. From showcases of new technology like the pneumatic passenger railway in 1864 to the Festival of the Empire in 1911. The palace suffered a small fire in 1866 when the north transept burned down. It was never repaired and replaced with an outdoor garden. Sadly, by the 1930s, the palace had started to fall into disrepair and visitor numbers had started to decline. Then one fateful November night in 1936, the palace suffered a major fire fueled by strong winds. This destroyed the entire building, and the glow could be seen across 8 counties. It is said that over 100,000 people came to watch the blaze, among them Winston Churchill. The palace site was swiftly cleared, and all that remained were 2 large water towers built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel. The South Tower was demolished soon after the fire due to structural concerns, and the North Tower was demolished in 1941 due to its prominence as a landmark during World War II. The site today has many remains still intact. Its use as a public park still continues to this day. But the palace itself, despite numerous attempts in modern times to rebuild, has long gone. Over the next few videos, I will be showing you all that remains today and uncovering many of the hidden clues to what once stood across the entire Crystal Palace Park. So I'm just making my way into these trees from the terrace because I spotted something off the pathway. It's what remains of some old stairs hidden in the trees. A massive stone staircase with what looks like would have been statues here as well. There's plinths, or there's bolt marks on the corners of this plinth here. So yeah, definitely some grand staircase here. Now, the Crystal Palace ran all the way along the back there, right over to the other side of the park. Like I said, it was huge, but it also came out at the sides and ran down here as well in small buildings that ran all the way down, probably a few hundred yards that way on both sides. And just in the trees at the back of this staircase, just on my right here, is the original back wall for the building that I was talking about, that came out from the palace and ran down the side. This is the original back wall here, you can just see it. There's also one on the other side, like I said, of the palace, and you can see the original back wall of that one as well, right near the Crystal Palace station down there. And then right here you can see like a cellar of the old building. Let's get down and have a look. Yeah, so here is what looks like a cellar underneath the original building here. So at this level you would have been in the building branching off down the side here, and this would have been the lower basement level. You can see some large like bunkers underneath here. Yeah, I love things like that when you come off the beaten track. That's why normally if something's fenced off, I'll have a look at least. And there you can see them again, the old cellars. So I've ventured up now to what would have been the eastern section of Crystal Palace, and inside there would have been the aquarium, and also right next to it would have been one of the famous Brunel water towers that you can see on here. It would be the North Tower that was here. So we're going to go have a look at that site now and see what remains of all of that. Now, just to bear in mind, that side of Crystal Palace actually burned down well before they had the big fire that finished it off. So just as I'm heading up, in the trees here, you've got these concrete like round plinths. Now, I'm pretty sure I've seen them in the construction of Crystal Palace. I think they were the original foundations for the steel or the iron girders holding the palace up. I've definitely seen them before. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. Probably not in the original place. The palace would have been here, but they could have been moved later on. There's lots of rubble here as well, because obviously they just destroyed the whole palace. Now this section here is now the Arkiva mast or TV mast you can see there. So this bit's private now, but that was part of the palace. It came as far as this, in fact a bit further over towards there, and it would have towered above us here, and this would have been one of the basement levels, but they've all built on that now. And also the aquarium was here, and you can actually see the remains of that aquarium. Yeah, you can see the aquarium tanks there. Now I believe that they are currently working on trying to restore, or at least repair, this section of the aquarium here. As it says over there, the Crystal Palace Foundation. I think they are working, they're looking for funding to try and restore that back to its former glory. Yeah, you can see it much better up here. You can see where the building would have been at the back there. You can see down there as well another tank. Now I wonder where that door leads at the back end. I'd love to go in there. I bet it carries on. Alright, so just as we're heading up the road here to the edge of the palace, you just see this rounded concrete base sticking out here with bricks inside. Now I know exactly what that was. That would have been the Brunel North Tower foundations. So right here you would have had these massive towering structures right up there, one on either side of the palace, holding thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water, probably millions, all to feed the fountains across the park all the way down into the valley. So they needed that pressure from here of the water pushing down to make the fountains 200-300 feet tall further down, and it worked. But there's the base of it anyway. I never thought we'd see that actually. So yeah, Isambard Kingdom Brunel designed and built those. And at least there's something left of it. It's not completely gone. I know the other side there's a bit more left. Now just at the top of here is a large reservoir now. Used to be one of the storage reservoirs for the top. Used to feed the towers, the water in the towers here. Yeah, I've just come around the other side and you can see the reservoir. It's definitely filled in. And over there where that white building is, would have been one of the old pump houses as well. Or engine house as it was called on the map. Pumping the water probably into the water towers over here and then down to the fountains. Now we're going to head to the west side of the palace and take a look at the Brunel Water Tower, the South Tower, and also the Crystal Palace Museum. So here you can see the concrete base again. Now I keep saying concrete base, but it's actually rendered, so it's bricks inside there with a rendering around the outside. Now we're just approaching the base of the tower here from the other side, and you can just see a little passageway into the tower. So this would have been used to access the tower up a winding staircase. And you can clearly see the remains of that inside there. Now, like I said earlier, this tower was demolished straight after the fire. So this was the first one to go, and I think it was due to structural damage from the fire. But you can clearly see here the big pipes coming from the tower. And there would have been a lever just at the top there to open a valve. But this would have fed the water right down into the park to supply the fountains. And here you can see the back side of the Crystal Palace Museum that's still open today. This is an original building that was here before. I also found this just behind the museum. It looks like a weighbridge, and it did have a date of 1920 on it. So that would have been there when the palace was open. So we're now going to head back to the west side of the palace and look at some stairs that headed down to the upper terrace. And also take a look at some abandoned stairs and the staircase to the west transept. So here you can see the stairs are intact leading down to the upper terrace. In fact, these sphinxes on the outside have actually been recently repainted and refurbished. Now here you can see the abandoned staircase which is hidden in the trees. This would have led down to the lower terrace. And then these stairs here would have headed straight into the west transept of the palace. So the palace would have been right at the top of those stairs. We found this at the side of the pathway. It looked like a big mound of rubble hidden in the trees. This would have been roughly where the palace came down to. So this is probably the remains of the floor from in the palace. And again here, we found a mound, which is exactly where the palace would have stood. So I believe that they've piled all the rubbish underneath there from the palace. We're now going to take a look at the staircase up to the centre of the palace. As you can see here, this is the concrete foundations for the main stairs that led into the palace. Now these were different to the other stairs. These were actually quite a lot higher and they were on a raised platform. So this is probably the remains of the supports for the stairs leading up. But you can clearly see they are very old and original. We're now going to head up onto the actual palace site. So I'm going to start on the west side. So the palace would have headed right across to the far side where those trees are there, and then all the way to the right. I'm now going to show you a reconstruction of one of the columns for the palace. This is here as a memorial today. But you can just see the sheer size of just one of those supporting columns that made up the palace. And just to the side of the sculpture, I saw these concrete foundations here with what looks like some large bolts sticking out. Now these to me look like some kind of a cable stay. And then just in the undergrowth here, we found some brickwork which looked like a vaulted ceiling. Now this section here is what I would call an out of bounds mound. It's completely fenced off. You can't access it, but it is very high up and raised compared to the rest of the foundations for the palace. So I reckon, again, a lot of the palace remains were dumped inside there. Now I would love to have gone in there and had a look, but like I said, it was completely fenced off. On the east side of the palace is another one of those staircases that remain. This again has been recently restored and repainted, but that would have led directly into the east transept for the palace, which actually burnt down early in its life. Now we're going to take a look at the terraces that made up the front of the palace. So you've got the upper terrace and the lower terrace. Now on this central section here, or the lower terrace as it's known, right across to there was elaborate fountains all the way along as well. There were small fountain basins with large fountains inside them all along the front of here. Again, all gone today. Now, I do believe there might be the remains of one of the fountain basins over there, but I'll check that out later on. But on this side, there is nothing remaining that I can see anyway. Just look how amazing these old terraces are here. It's a shame to see them in such a state like today. They could easily be restored and opened up to the public. It's now all fenced off, apart from this section here where I can get really close to it. But you can see the quality in the stonework in there. And it wouldn't take much to restore these. I'm sure they could get a grant from somewhere to fix these up. And then the terrace around the front hand side here. And then just out of nowhere, we've got a headless statue. Now there's plenty of these all over the park. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of statues in this park. A lot of them have been vandalised, and a lot of them are still in storage as well. They did rescue some of them, but this one's got no head, as you can see. Starting at the bottom west side of the park, let's look at the original dinosaur park that is still popular today. The dinosaur park opened in 1854 along with the palace itself, as the first dinosaur sculptures in the world. The models were designed and sculpted by Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, representing the latest scientific knowledge at the time, hence why they aren't the most accurate of looking dinosaurs based on today's knowledge. There are various dinosaur sculptures and other extinct animals across this large manicured area of the park. The sculptures were Grade 2 listed in 1973 and are now Grade 1 listed after a restoration in 2002. The dinosaur park is still as popular and as beautiful today as it was in 1854. We are now going to take a look at the two large fountain basins at the bottom centre of the park, starting with a smaller fountain pond that cascaded down into one of the large basins. This part of the fountain basin has been sealed off for many decades, but it is still visible through the fence and preserved by the foliage. It would have been a rectangular shape and featured a cascade down the hill and into the west basin. Here's an illustration of what it would have looked like in relation to the large west fountain basin. As we headed towards the west basin, I spotted this concrete block in the middle of the old rosary site. It looks like some kind of a foundation. Has anyone got any ideas what this could have been? On my way towards the centre of the park, I stopped to show the former site of an attraction from the Festival of the Empire. This would have been the site for one of the many switchback railways to be found around the park at the festival. In modern terms, it was a roller coaster that had to be turned around at the opposite end so it could come back to where it started. It was located right here on a straight section of land long before the trees took over. So I'm just heading towards the main central walkway right through the centre of the park and onwards up to the palace. Now all this bottom section here, and I'll show you in a minute, had a fountain basin, a very large one, either side of the walkway. But just before we get there, I want to have a look down here because since they built the sports centre, which is just behind us here, in the fountain basin, all of this is 50s and 60s concrete rubbish, basically, that they've slapped on top. There used to be grand staircases and avenues and fountains all down here. Now, I'm going to slightly venture off the beaten track and hopefully we're going to find some things. So the first thing that I've spotted at the side of the concrete, I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but there is a staircase just in them trees there. I'll try show you from the other side. They go down there. So this would have been the Grand Avenue through down to the entrance at the bottom of the park. And the fountain basins would have been just behind me, the first ones anyway. And now we're faced with this concrete monstrosity. But just look, the Grand Avenue has disappeared from up the centre of it, where you had the cascading fountains going up as well. And we've now got this. Just makes you wonder what they were actually taking in the 60s for them to pass and build that. So here's those stairs from the other side. I managed to get down underneath the bridge. I'm not sure if this is an original Victorian staircase. I'll have to check the map and confirm it below. So I'm now underneath the concrete structure. That's the main avenue down there, just behind the ice cream van. You would have had a grand staircase heading up here. And then on this level here, you would have gone straight forward. And again, there would have been another grand staircase in front, making its way up the hill towards the palace, which would have been right at the top of the site up there. But as you can see, we've got this concrete walkway now. But right in here, again, would have been the fountain basins. I would have been stood inside the basins now. So you had one on the left here, which is now a sports stadium. And then you had the one on the right over here, which is now the sports centre. Now I was hoping to find some remains down here of the original path going through, or even the stairs or anything like that, but there's absolutely nothing. You can just tell when they built this sports centre here in the 60s, they've just demolished everything within the vicinity and just it's gone, basically. Can't find anything that resembles it.
Now this is the original Grand Centre Walk, heading down to the Penge Gate at the bottom of the park. We are going to head down here and then up the east side of the park towards some more original attractions. As you can see today, it's a food festival. Obviously, I cut out the bit where I'm scoffing a lovely gyros and throwing it all over my shirt. Just on the right hand side of the Grand Centre Walk is also the original boating lake. That's still in use today, and it was also known as the Lower Lake.
So I'm now at the bottom end of the park near the Penge entrance, and the Grand Avenue that I just walked down in the middle used to have a large circular fountain there as well, and I'm talking many years ago, probably the 1850s. Now just behind me here is the council depot, but it used to be a large pump house here. I'll just turn you around and show you. So this was a large pump house, but I've just spotted something in the council depot over here, and I think it's some statues from the original Crystal Palace at the top. A lot of the statues have gone now from the actual terraces at the top. So this is the main bottom right section of Crystal Palace Park. Very busy today because of the weather. But you can see
Crystal Palace Park, you know what's going on.
He knows. You can see how busy it is today because the sun's out. But all behind me here used to be a large cricket pitch and a cricket pavilion. There's also a small holding pond or lake down here as well to hold water, ready to be pumped back up to the top of the hill. So this is what is known as the Middle Reservoir. It's now a local fishing place. Some nice little piers over there for fishing. This was basically made to hold the water for the central sections in the park, for the fountains. So you had three major reservoirs in the park. One being the main lake down at the bottom of the park. Then you had this one, which was the middle one. And then you had the large reservoir right at the top near the palace. And then you had the water towers up there as well. That was for the pressure. So you had three reservoirs coming through the park. Now the bottom one, I showed you the lower engine house down there, or the pumping house. There was another pumping house just up here, which is now gone as well. And just here's the location for the old pumping house, right next to the stage. Now you can just see a brick building in there, but it's only a tiny part of one, but it's definitely a Victorian building. It's just literally the size of a lift shaft now. So what I'm coming up to now is a modern art installation, which is actually a live music stage just around here, but it has fallen into disrepair. Now believe it or not, but that's actually water in front of the stage. It looks like concrete from here. I just point you around. It's covered in algae, so it looks like a surface, but it's actually water. Yeah, this stage here has hosted quite a few very famous acts in the day, back in the day. But this wasn't the original. Like I say, this is, I don't know, I can't even tell you the year, but I'll put it in down below. But this originally here was an amphitheatre back in the Victorian times. I used to sit around here watching performances down here. But as you can see, it's seen better days now. The staging has all gone through, there's no wood left on it, it's all rotting away. So this here is one of the other original features in Crystal Palace Park. It's been here since day one pretty much. This is the famous hedge maze, and it is a big spiral maze right in the middle of the park, and it's still here today and it's still open. As you can see, I'm stood right in the middle of it now. But it's amazing how this has lasted right up until today in its original location as well. And it looks in pretty good shape, to be honest. I think it's maintained by the council these days. But anyway, I've been in here about 20 minutes and it's hot and I'm stuck. I need to get out and get some water. So I'm now stood right in the centre of the park, on the central avenue that would have gone down the middle. Now, the large concrete section, which is taken over by the sports centre, or the monstrosity as I will call it, is behind the camera down there, and I'll turn you around and show you that now. So this would have been the original Grand Avenue down the middle. And where the concrete section is, it would have continued down. But instead, the concrete section bridges the old fountain basins either side of it. Now, just here, on both sides of this avenue here, there was what was known as cascade fountains going down. I'll try show you a picture of that, or at least show you what it was. There was one on this side, and also one on this side. But this curious thing about the one on this side is there is now tennis courts built on where the site of the old cascade fountain was. You can see the tennis courts heading down the hill there, one after the other, just like the fountains would have done back in the day. This would have all been water cascading down at the side of this avenue here. Now, I've no idea what this is supposed to be. Is it some 60s idea of a sculpture? I'm not sure. Now, also on this central avenue, just a bit further up towards the palace, there was another large fountain basin. This was a huge central fountain, circular, with a massive fountain in the middle. And I'm glad to see it's been kept, or not. Look what's replaced it today. An ice cream van and a car park. Not very imaginative, I must say. Such a shame that all that disappeared. It was huge. So when I was saying earlier on about the fountain basins along this lower level here, have all been filled in. There's one that looks like a fountain basin, but I'm not sure if it actually is. There's a fence in a circular fashion with some what looks like water plants, and it looks like water in there, but I can't, it's quite deep, but I can't see the actual water itself, but it must be at the bottom. But it's in a circular fashion, so this to me looks like a fountain from above anyway, or the basin. It could have been built on the exact spot where the basin was. So I think, if I remember rightly, you had 4 of these all along this bottom section here with massive jet fountains going up as well.
We're going to start with the low-level station. Located at the west side of Crystal Palace Park, it opened in 1854 along with the relocation of the Crystal Palace from Hyde Park. The station serves trains running between London Bridge and London Victoria, in addition to services terminating at Beckenham Junction and Sutton. The station is also a terminus of the East London line of the London Overground. It is accessed by the Crystal Palace Tunnel, which ventures underneath the palace site, and also the 2,200-ton Brunel Water Tower. There used to be a covered walkway running all the way from the palace and down to the station. The outer wall of this still exists today, just outside the station. Now let's head up to the north side of the park and behind the palace, and we're going to look at what was the site of the high-level station. This opened later in 1865 to bring further services from London to the palace. The station was excavated into a ridge just below Crystal Palace Parade and required major engineering works. Due to the reduction in numbers from the palace when it burnt down in 1936, the station eventually closed in 1954, but it wasn't demolished until 1961.
So right where I'm stood now would have been the Crystal Palace upper station, and you can see the remaining station wall there all along the side of it. So the main Crystal Palace is across the road directly over there, and then the park leaves from there and makes its way down the valley there. But this one was the main Crystal Palace station at the time. As you can see now, it's all a new housing estate here, but all the walls around the side are the original walls, including this bridge here. This is the original bridge. So the line came in from the back end over there. It exited a tunnel underneath the hill and came into the station. Now this station was a terminus station, so the lines would have come in and gone straight back out, but they also had a turntable on this side of the bridge. So let me go over there and show you that. So directly down here was a turntable where they could bring the engines in and turn them round and then go back out forward. And you can see some of the old recesses down there in the edges. So I've made it down to the lower level. You can see the old station wall right here, a bit closer up. So I'll be stood on the track beds now, or the platforms, pretty much. It was the full width of this housing development here. And then it went all the way back to the end of this wall here. It was quite a big station. And then beyond that, it just turned into an embankment, or like a retaining wall, and then entered the tunnel a couple of 100 yards further down there. Now directly up here, there is a subway just above that wall there, going underneath the road, the main road there, and the palace would have been just behind it. So what you did, you came through the station, walked across a bridge into there and under a subway, which is very, very grand inside. Now, people arriving here were coming to go to the palace, and it was the dignified people that went to the palace. So they wanted it to look nice. I mean, the structure was impressive, but they wanted the station and right through to the palace to look nice as well. So the station was very grand, and this subway was something else. Now, if I can, I'm just going to send the drone up here so I can show you the subway from this side, and then we'll try and show you from the other side. Because at the minute, this is being restored back to its former glory, and it's closed off, so I can't get in and show you.
We're now going to take a look at the approximate site of the little-known Crystal Palace atmospheric or pneumatic railway, or the Victorian Hyperloop, if you will. Built in the park in 1864 and only lasting a matter of months, it ran just over 600 yards in a 10-foot diameter brick tunnel between the Sydenham and the Penge gates to the park. The tunnel had a gradient of 1 in 15 and followed a sharp curve. Its main premise was to showcase the new technology in the hope that it would be purchased for use in the real world. It consisted of a single 35-passenger carriage that ran through an airtight tunnel. The carriage would be sucked and pushed to either terminus via a steam-powered fan. This is an approximation of the route. This purely is based on guesswork from multiple sources, but it does involve some clues and information that we managed to find. It would also match the length of 600 yards and the curve described. Also, if you look at these two LiDAR images, you can see what appears to be a suitable depth for the train to enter a tunnel and head underground. And also the same at the Sydenham station site. This appears to be an impression in the ground where the station site was.
So I'm stood currently at the bottom end of Crystal Palace Park and near the Penge entrance. Now we think, or it's rumoured to be, the starting point somewhere around here behind me of where the pneumatic railway started, where the station was, near the Penge gate. And then you would have gone into a tunnel, and then that's where the air pressure would have pushed the train all the way up to the top of the hill, which we'll get to shortly, and I'll show you where we think the top station was as well, the Sydenham station. So just to my left over here is the boating lake behind that fence, and currently we've got some, I would say new, but they're not new, some Victorian villas here built on the edge of the park. Now these didn't used to be here, but this would have been a completely empty piece of land all the way around the bottom of the park. Now I know there used to be some kind of a rifle range down here, and the rumours are that the railway was somewhere, it did say, near the Penge entrance, which is just over there, and near the rifle range, which was here on the right. Now if you look around, the only place I can see topographically that would work would be down here, or maybe in these trees here. So that boating lake here has always been here from day one, and it's the level it's at wouldn't have changed. So the only place you can think of they would have built it, and we know it was somewhere around here, would be down here in the little valley. So the rumours are, and it's not confirmed by any means, but the rumours are that the station was somewhere down here. Now we know that this only lasted a couple of months, so I'm currently stood in the trees where we think the station would have been. Now again, we're only going off this picture to show what it looked like. Now we know that this is probably using artist's license to show you what it looked like. We don't think it's accurate by any means, but it would have been based on something. But I reckon it was somewhere around here. Like I said, you've got the higher level to my right up here for the boating lake, and then the main road is just over there. So none of this would have changed, but this section here is level with the road, and then just over here it goes in to a steep hillside going up. So that could be where the tunnel entrance was. Now for a second I thought that was some pieces of railway track down there. Not that you would find them there, but that's fencing. I thought it was a railway track. So I'm going to hedge my bets and say it was where I was in them trees there. You can see how steep it is down there. So like I say, the rumours are it followed these villas here underneath the ground, right across here and all the way around the edges here. And like I said, the villas are here as well on the outer edges of the park. They wouldn't have been there. Now just a bit further up here it rises quite sharply, but the route would be roughly where I'm walking now. It would be somewhere underneath here, heading up and curving its way round right to the top up there. And I'll show you where the Sydenham station was believed to be up here. So I've just moved a bit further up, but again there's the route that would have headed around the edge of the park there, somewhere in that vicinity. Now they did do a couple of test digs somewhere, I believe around here. We're not 100%, I can't tell you for sure, but they were somewhere around here. Somebody will know where they were, and they thought they found some kind of a tunnel underneath, but not 100%. Like I say, it was only around for a couple of months, so the chance of it leaving a lasting impression is quite slim. So I bet if you dug down a lot of this earth here, you would find a lot of things remaining, but it is never going to happen unless they do some building work on it. So this is the Sydenham gate behind me here, and we know that it exited very close to this gate. I'm now right at the top of the hill, and it definitely went up a hill. Now where I am, I think, would have been the rough site of where the station was, it would have exited on a slope and then had a holding brake at the top of some sort, and then they would literally have released it back into the tunnel using air pressure to keep it, to slow it down basically, as it rolled down via gravity alone down to the bottom station. So this is the current site here. Now these trees have been here for hundreds of years, so I'm going to bet that that hasn't changed much. I reckon it was somewhere in this vicinity right here would have been the end station, or the Sydenham station as it was called. Now very close to the end, the Sydenham terminus for the pneumatic railway here, there was also another type of railway here, but this only featured during the Festival of the Empire, and it was known as the Kearney's Railway, or high-speed railway it was called. Now to me it looked like a hybrid of a monorail and a railway, and it kind of resembled the Wuppertal in Germany. It kind of resembled them, but it had track underneath as well. So it was basically a suspended car from a rail, also on a bottom track. It's hard to describe, but I'll show you a picture of it now. Now the benefit with this was apparently the stability and the fact that it could take tight corners very fast because it wouldn't roll off or tip over. I think that was the benefit. Now they piloted it here, right in the park, during the Festival of the Empire, but the idea didn't cotton on at all. But that system is literally a couple of hundred yards away from the pneumatic railway, which is behind us, and it ran just down here along the edge of the pathway here and curved its way right over there to the central avenue right in the middle of the park. It was only a small section, like an L shape, that came round here.
This was the strangest railway proposal of all. On paper it seems pointless, but when you look at the advantages, it can navigate tight curves, it was impossible for derailments, and speed would not be an issue. It was proposed to be a tube-based railway with rails on the ground as a conventional railway, and also the added upper guide rail on the roof. It would also adopt a roller coaster type motion, where it would leave the subsurface stations and into deep level tunnels, using gravity to speed up the train as it descends and slowed down naturally when it climbs up to the next station. The closest this came to fruition was actually a proposed system in Leeds, where plans advanced as far as discussions with the council. Ultimately, it never caught on and none were actually commissioned. A full working model-based railway was built here at Crystal Palace for the Festival of the Empire in 1911. It was a short section of track that ran on the route as seen on this diagram. Although it was believed to have been a scale model, I just can't understand how it would have travelled the distance depicted on this image.
you enjoyed our look into the history of Crystal Palace and the park as well. Like I said, I've really wanted to come here for a long time, and I'm glad I've done it. Absolutely baking, but I think I'm going to get a good video out of this. But thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and any comments down below, and I'll see you next week. Bye.